So this is a short presentation for you to follow through to gain a good understanding about how the coast is managed. Most of the examples that are drawn upon are from the UK, but there are some stuff from further afield as well. Whilst you're listening and watching, you may wish to make some notes, at least write down the things which are on the slides, but please do add some more other things around I'm telling you in the video as well. So the first thing I want you to do is to watch this short video, which is going to come up in a second, and whilst you're watching, I want you to think about these three questions. So why does the coast need to be managed? Who or what is being protected? And what two major options for management exist? To get some good answers to those questions, and hopefully it's fairly clear that the two main options that exist are hard and soft options, and that the reason why the coast is being protected is because it's of huge, great economic, social, and environmental importance to people. So in terms of the economy, the most obvious example of gaining income, I suppose, comes from tourism and tourism activities. Most of the tourism activities are centred around the coastline itself. So the beach is important to protect. Also, in terms of environmental terms, the coastline is of huge importance because the sort of ecosystems that exist there don't exist anywhere else. Remember that we looked at examples like in Sutherland Bay of how wonderful sand dune ecosystems are in terms of flora and fauna. There is a wider issue to consider as well, because as global sea levels rise due to climate change, more and more coastal areas are under threat, and there's homes and properties fall into the sea. Coastal protection is going to be needed to protect against that. So, how does the process of coastal management work? Well, what happens is that, first of all, when a coast is considered to be under threat in any way, shape, or form, cost-benefit analysis is completed. And then the strategy is discussed as how to go about doing this. So cost-benefit analysis is basically where a group of engineers, of geographers, usually paid for by the local council, they go to a coastal area, they look at what are the potential risks associated with that coastline, and if coastal erosion continues, what are the costs of that going to be? So who's going to lose out against what are the benefits that are derived from actually protecting that coastline? They literally put together a pros and cons list. So on one side they say, what are the economic pros of protecting an area, and what are the economic cons of not protecting it. And then they put a balance together and work out whether they can afford to protect the coastline. And then, once they've decided they want to protect the coastline, they can do one of three things. The first thing is to hold the line. The second thing is is to advance the line. The third option is to retreat the line, or to do nothing. What do you think each of these means? So we think about those three different options that I mentioned in the last slides. Actually, what often happens is that a combination of those three is used, or a combination of two of the three is used. But here's some interesting examples of different options that have been used. So when the cost-benefit analysis is complete, those people put together something which is called a shoreline management plan, an SNP, a shoreline management plan. Let me show that for you. Okay, so in my best sort of childish writing, SNP stands for shoreline management plan. Let's make sure we make this back. So here's an example of some shoreline management plans which have taken place. And I want you just to have a look at these images quite carefully. You might need to pause the video now and just think why. First of all, what shoreline management plan is in place, and perhaps why that is. So as was mentioned earlier, there are two main types of techniques that are used to protect the coastline. One of the methods is called hard engineering, the other one is called soft engineering. So hard engineering is building artificial structures such as seawalls aimed at controlling natural processes. So these are big, expensive, technical pieces of building work that are put in place to stop and to control the processes of erosion and transportation and encourage deposition in most cases. Whereas soft engineering techniques are a more sustainable approach, and they manage the coast by working with the coastal processes. So they tend to take much longer to work, and in essence, in the short term, they are less effective. But in the longer term, they tend to be more attractive and also as effective, technically, as hard engineering. So those are the two methods. Hard engineering techniques are much more expensive than soft engineering techniques. So we're going to have a look at examples of a few of these different types of hard and soft engineering. The first one to look at, which is the most commonly understood methods of hard engineering, is seawall. So these work by basically building a big wall at the point where the sea would normally hit the beach or hit the cliffs, and they absorb the energy of the waves and they stop the erosion process happening. So they have the advantage of being very effective at protecting against erosion. And they can also protect against coastal flooding in some areas. So coastal flooding is where the sea inundates the land due to storms or exceptionally high tides. Lands and buildings are protected. So this is what is very common, it's very expensive, it's very immediate, and it works very, very well to protect areas with high economic value. So if there's ever anything that needs protecting which has a high economic value, the seawall should be placed. One of the advantages of it as well is it does also offer the opportunities for people to be able to use them for recreation, to walk along, and I'm sure you yourself have walked on a seawall at some point. The disadvantage is that sometimes seawalls are expensive to build. Curved seawalls reflect the energy of waves back into the sea, and this means that waves do actually remain powerful. And over time, the wall may begin to erode. The cost of maintenance is very high. What I'd like to do is just for you to watch a video of me explaining the advantages and disadvantages of the seawall in Corfu town. I hope you enjoyed that video.
Hi, I'm here in Corfu town, it's very windy, and I'm getting wet from all this spray which is coming off the seawall. You might be able to see just behind me there's an old fort, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which has been here for a long time. Yes, these seawalls are really taking a lot of bettering today. It's April, it's kind of a little bit windy, but it's quite windy. It's not sort of too bad for weather conditions, but this seawall's taking a lot of pumping, and you can see that the spray is coming up all over the cars, all over the buildings, and the seawall's definitely doing its job, but it is, you know, under a lot of pressure. So how long this thing can survive for without any maintenance is, well, it's not going to survive for very long, to be honest. So they need to maintain these sort of things on a regular basis. The wall itself is sort of very old school construction. It's just a series of bricks. Just getting wet there again. Just a series of bricks put together, not like the sort of modern kind of single concrete frame ones that you'll see in places across the UK that have been recently protected. Anyway, I'm going to get wet and windy, but then I'm off to play cricket.
The next type of building art engineering that I want you to consider is groins. And you should again be familiar with groins. They are generally wooden structures that are built at right angles to the beach, and they hope to stop the process of longshore drift and collect sediment as it moves across the beach, and then allow the beach to build up naturally over time. And the best form of protection for the beach is, for the cliff is the beach itself. So by encouraging deposition in this way, the beach is protected naturally and very, very effectively. The disadvantages, though, is that they can be unattractive and they can also be costly to build and to maintain. So I'm just going to show you a quick case study of the section with a number of groins that have been in place on Swanage Beach. So here is a couple of pictures of some groins in Swanage, and you can see that they have been very, very effective. The reason that we know they're very effective is because in this picture up here, you can see there's lots of sediment which is collected here, and on the other side of the groin, there's very, very little, there's less sediment. There's a big step down. Okay, and perhaps you can see it better on this side as well, where the line of the beach comes across here, then the groin is in place, and then over the other side, you can see there's a distinct bit where less sediment has been deposited. So basically, just draw this in. So the sediment is being moved across Swanage Bay in this direction, and it's collecting up against the groin here, here. Okay, that allows the beach to build up and to remain safe and secure. Just to allow you to understand the situation with the groins at Swanage a little bit more clearly, here is a map or an aerial imaging ArcGIS which actually shows the groin system. So, just to sort of understand why they put the groins where they are first. This is the Swanage outline of the Swanage urban area around here. Okay, so if you like, this is the valuable area of land which they want to protect. And what they've done at Swanage is they've built a seawall that runs all the way along the seafront here. Okay. And then also, along with that, they've put the groins in. You can't sort of see them amazingly well. I'll zoom in a second, but there are in fact some 18 groins in the system that run from this point here all the way along to this point here. Okay. Now, in this section here, you can see it's farmland. And there's two reasons why that hasn't been protected. First of all, because there's a low economic value associated with that area. Because if the cliffs fall into the sea, if that land is lost, well, yeah, farming land is lost. But then the cost-benefit analysis will show that the amount of money that is lost from that land going into the sea is not as much as the cost of building seawalls or groins themselves. On another note, this is also part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the UN, the United Nations, who run the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, say that they do not want that section of coastline to be protected, so that's another point. We will actually come and look at this in a bit more detail in a minute, but as well as having a seawall, as well as having all of these 18 groins all the way along here, this area of the beach is also has artificial sediment added to the area. So there's a process which is called beach nourishment, whereby material is taken from either here or perhaps even other parts of Swanage Bay out here as well. So it's dug up and then it's actually dumped onto the beach here. We'll have a little look at that inside. So I've just zoomed in here a little bit more closely so you can actually see where the groins are. And again, evidence to sort of show how effective they are being. Because remember, the sediment is being moved in this direction, and the sediment is collecting behind the groin here, and here, and here. And then we've got this distinctive step over the other side of the groin, where the sediment is being starved from. Okay, so that's a good indication that our groins are working, and that the beach is allowed to be built up. Now this image is taken right from the end of the groin system, and it's significant because we can actually begin to see the difference in the level of coastal erosion without the groins, and the decrease in the size of the beach when the groins end. So we've got the groin system up to here, and then from this point onwards there is no coastal protection. So there's no seawall, there's no groin, and there's no beach nourishment. You can see quite clearly in this section here that there's a lot more erosion, there's a lot more exposed rock. Okay, so that's an indication that there's more erosion. And the beach begins to narrow quite significantly, I think, down here. Okay, so that's sort of an example in some ways the value of how effective our groins are at reducing coastal erosion. But at the same time, this is creating something which is called terminal groin syndrome. Terminal groin syndrome. And what happens is that the sediment is being collected here, so this area of the cliff is nicely protected, but when you end the groin system, there's no more sediment which is being passed on to this area down here. So the sediment is being starved, the waves' energies are greater when they're meeting the cliffs there, so we get more coastal erosion. This picture here shows the area immediately after the groin system has ended. You can see how much more sediment has been eroded from these cliffs here. The cliffs themselves are showing signs of slumping. There's some material that's fallen down here, probably some sort of landslide, and there's rock falls. All this material here is coming straight from the cliff. This is in great contrast to the area of beach where I showed you those original groins a few slides ago. So, you know, this section of beach is a lot less appealing for tourists to use because coastal erosion is happening so much more readily. So, another form of hard engineering which is used is rock armour or boulder barriers. And these are large boulders that are piled up on a beach. They're used to absorb the energy of the waves and to decrease erosive energy, but also to encourage the build-up of beach material. So what happens is that a wave comes crashing in, and then all the energy is absorbed within the rocks themselves, okay, and dissipated within those rocks there. Okay, that reduces the energy of the waves. They can either be built along the coastline or at right angles to the beach. They can sort of sometimes fulfill the same role as a groin. And the advantages are they're very good at absorbing the energy and they allow the beach to be able to build up. Disadvantages are that they're expensive to obtain and to transport the boulders, and they can be quite ugly. One of the most commonly used rock types for these boulders is a type of granite. Remember, granite's a very, very hard rock, but a particular type of granite which is called dolerite. Dolerite is the hardest of the hards of granite rocks, and it's found most commonly in the fjords of western Norway. So there's big sort of mining projects in the fjords of western Norway, and that rock gets dug out and extracted and transported to the coastline in the UK. Now, because that rock is so very, very hard, it's very difficult to quarry it, to dig it out, and that comes with great expense. Okay, so now we're going to move on and look at soft engineering options. And soft engineering options tend to be less expensive, more long-term and sustainable, with a less impact on the environment than hard engineering options. So if you can just make sure that you write down that definition, I'm going to take you through a few of the different soft engineering options that exist. So beach nourishment is a type of soft option which I mentioned earlier in the context of swanage. So what happens here is that beach material is dumped directly onto the beach, so taken from one area and dumped to somewhere else. It replaces any material that's been removed by longshore drift. It requires constant maintenance to keep replacing the beach material as it gets washed away. And depending upon where you are in the world and what kind of materials are being used depends upon how often beach nourishment takes place. These images on the right hand side are taken from Newhaven Beach, which is on the Sussex coastline, so not too far away, further east from Swanage. And on Newhaven Beach they generally do this beach nourishment once or twice a year. Once at the start of the sort of the big tourist season, if you like, so sort of springtime, so March and April, and then once at the end as well of the summer as we move into the winter period of time. But this is quite coarse material which is used here, so it's quite difficult for this material to be moved, so you have to do it twice a year. I used to live in Australia next to a beautiful white sand beach, which was absolutely fantastic, and the material was incredibly fine. They used to re-nourish the beach there once a week by extracting the fine sand from the local river estuary and dumping it onto the beach once a week. So depending upon where you were, it depends upon how often that material is to be nourished. The great advantage of this is that it looks wonderfully natural. The beach looks normal, so it's well used by tourists as a result. One disadvantage is though that when the material itself is removed, it can disrupt marine ecosystems. So another soft engineering option to think about is mass creation management treatment. Now this is the third of our three options within our shoreline management plan, which is known as do nothing or manage retreat. So this is where an area of coast is allowed to erode and flood naturally. The advantages are that it encourages development of beach and sand dunes, natural defence, and salt marshes, which are also important for the environment. And the cost is very low. However, people do need to be compensated for the loss of land and the loss of buildings, and often it happens in areas of farmland. Managed retreat is something which is being done sort of more widely now across the United Kingdom. The final method of soft engineering, my favourite soft engineering method, if I had to commit to one, is this one, sand dune regeneration. So sand dunes are a fantastic method of protecting the coastline. They look great, they have great amenity, great value for human beings and for animals. And so that's why I think that they're a very, very useful method of coastal protection. So what happens here is that sand dunes are protected, they're supported to become more effective and to grow more quickly. And this is done by reducing access for recreation and for vehicles, so that reduces footpath erosion or vehicle erosion. They also build barriers to allow the sand to accumulate. They do this by planting something called marrow grass, which is this tall grass here, which is the grass which is used to support the growth of sand dunes. It's very, very long roots. So what typically happens is that an area is barriered off here, and then lots of marrow grass is planted in the area behind the dune. That allows the dunes to build up and up over time, and then we have our natural coastal barrier. This is very cheap, and one of the sort of most effective ways actually of allowing sand dunes to regenerate is by simply putting signage up to explain to people where they can and can't go and why it's important to protect the sand dunes. So here's a final summary table that hopefully encapsulates all of the methods that I've talked about and hopefully a few more things as well. So do just take time to read through this. This is actually from an A-level textbook, but I'm sure if you look in your GCSE, well, I am sure if you look in your GCSE textbook, there's something quite similar. But this kind of probably summarises it quite neatly. And I want you to use this table for the next exercise, which I'd like you to do on the next slide. So what I'd like you to do is to create a series of top trump cards, including all the information, some of the information in this presentation about different types of coastal protection methods, and also some other things as well. So I want you to, let's say, create maybe 6 to 8 cards. So maybe 3 soft engineering cards, 3 hard engineering cards, or a few more if you're feeling keen. What I want you to do is to, on your card, to work out a cost per square metre or hectare of that method. Now, some of those things I haven't talked about, but if you have a look at your GCSE textbook, there are actually some figures there of how much each of these things cost, so you'll have to do a little bit of extra research on that. And then I want you to think about the needs and maintenance, so is it high, or is it medium, or is it low, so choose one of those. Then, using your own sort of criteria, work out how effective it is in reducing erosion, so give it a score out of 10. Then also how beautiful you think it is, give it a score out of 10. And then if there are any other uses, give those a score out of 5. Okay, so we're going to create sort of 6 to 8 top trump cards, and then when we're all made, we'll have again top trumps cards. Okay, so that ends my little tour of introduction into coastal management.
Here I am at Westward Ho in North Devon. It's a 90th birthday party that I'm attending this evening, so that's why I'm down here. Anyway, there's loads of really interesting different types of coastal management, and I'll try and show you a few of them.
at the bar. I never try to work it out. We just lit the fire, and now you wanna put it out. You gave it all you got, and what you got is not a lot. Why don't you hand it over? Time is up, you've had your shot. Together once again, disasters in the end, it's like a default. You thought you'd made the grade, all you made would start to fade. We threw it in the fire, it's bad.